Walk with me through the halls of the Comic Kingdom. Captain Battle. One of the greatest and most overlooked patriotic American superheroes of all time. The very first superhero of this sort was The Shield, published by MLJ in Pep Comics way back in late 1939, with a cover date of January 1940. Captain America, who is without a doubt the most famous patriotic superhero, debuted in Timely's Captain America Comics number 1, cover dated March 1941, but actually released in December of 1940. By the time Captain Battle started, the idea of a flag-wearing superhero had become a trend. There were a ton of them in the Golden Age, and this idea has never been unpopular. Captain Battle made his debut in Lev Gleason's Silver Streak Comics number 10, cover dated May 1941. The only real problem with Captain Battle is how Lev Gleason handled him. The Captain had a strong start, but at the end of his short run, he became a mess. The character was a forced phenomenon, and if you have any age on you at all, you know that characters pushed on the public this hard do not last all that long. Captain Battle's solo series tanked after just 2 issues that same year. His run in Silver Streak, though, lasted exactly a year through number 21. The title ran only 2 more issues after that as a reprint series before shutting down. Captain Battle was completely done and soon faded into obscurity. The push that Lev Gleason gave to Captain Battle was incredible. The publisher really wanted this to be their Captain America, and they backed up their attempt with a great share of commercialism. To be fair though, Captain America and the Shield had more solid footing. They were more stable characters with established sagas. Captain Battle floundered a bit, and it's a shame. He was an awesome concept with a cool look, and he really could have gone places. Silver Streak Comics number 10. I say that Captain Battle floundered a bit, but to be sure, the whole title of Silver Streak struggled for stability from issue to issue. For its first 2 issues, there wasn't even a character named Silver Streak. Silver Streak, the superhero, was created for issue number 3, and although he wasn't the first fast guy superhero, he was the first to run super fast with the ability to fly, coming out before National's Johnny Quick. Obviously, Silver Streak was meant to be the leading feature of the title. However, the Silver Streak superhero never really took off to Gleason's liking. In issue number 6, the character of Daredevil was introduced. By the next issue, the character was already being featured on the cover and became a breakout hit. Of all the superheroes Lev Gleason put out, Daredevil was the only true superstar. It quickly became evident that Daredevil was going to move on to greater things, and eventually he did. But while he was still in Silver Streak Comics, Gleason wanted another breakout character. In issue number 10, they introduced Captain Battle, and I must say, the first story makes you want more. This was an awesome debut. Jack Binder, who created Daredevil and was the co-creator of Silver Streak, was also the creator of Captain Battle, along with Carl Forms. Jack Binder was the artist, and Carl Forms was the writer. Captain Battle had it going on in this first adventure. His real name was Jonathan Battle, and he actually had been in the army, so his captain title was for real. He was the youngest soldier in World War I and lost his left eye. Despite the eye patch, he was still a very cool looking guy. Since this was 1941, and World War I officially ended in 1919, with American involvement beginning in 1917, that would place Captain Battle's age as very late 30s or very early 40s. It all depends on how young he really was when he was fighting. At any rate, he wasn't a real young guy. Battle lived on a giant hilltop where he had a huge private laboratory. He was a scientist and inventor. Jane Lorraine was his sexy assistant who, for all we can guess, lived there with him. They didn't say if she was his girlfriend, but it seems very likely. He looks through an invention called the curvoscope that allows him to see anywhere on Earth. With that, he discovers a race of birdmen terrorizing Europe. He puts on his jetpack, which he calls a Luciflyer, and takes his special gun, the Dissolvo. The Dissolvo is quite a weapon. It melts people down to a gelatinous mass. Very nasty. Another superhero who came before Captain Battle, called the Comet, was also able to melt people down with his eye lasers. Something about turning people to slop seemed to fascinate the writers and artists. Before I go any further, I think we all need to appreciate just how cool Captain Battle looks. This was a good design. The white star in his blue shirt is a nod to Captain America. Besides that, the stylings are pretty unique to Captain Battle. The Jetpack Patriotic superhero is off to fight an Asian wizard called the Black Dragon and his birdmen, who he calls Deglows. The Deglows were once ordinary humans who he turned into monsters. They retain thinking capabilities and speech, but are completely brainwashed by the Black Dragon. It's a shame, but Captain Battle is forced to turn a lot of them into jelly via his Dissolvo gun. He kills a lot more Deglows, and one of the coolest visuals I've ever seen in a superhero comic. Earlier, Battle discovers that the Birdmen are vulnerable to radio beams. A trap is set, and when the Deglows fly too close to a nameless European fleet, probably British, a web of radio beams kills them all upon contact, dropping them into the ocean. That's the end of the story, but not the end of the war, and it appears like Black Dragon is going to be Captain Battle's arch nemesis. After his third appearance, we never see or hear of Black Dragon again. One of the problems with Captain Battle is that he never had a recurring enemy. People like seeing certain bad guys time and again. Silver Street Comics number 11. By the next issue, Captain Battle was already declared a sensation by the publisher and shown on the front cover. On the inside front cover, there is an ad for the quickly thrown together fan club, the Captain Battle Boys Brigade. He was also bumped up to first feature. This is quite a leap. Keep in mind, Daredevil was still a fairly new character, and he became very popular. But he was placed second after Captain Battle. This story is as awesome as the first. The Deglows invade Captain Battle's lab in order to capture him, but fail. Instead, they take his assistant, Jane Lorraine. He quickly goes on a rescue mission for Jane, and succeeds after beating the crap out of the Black Dragon. For some odd reason, Captain Battle just leaves him there. He doesn't kill Black Dragon, or even take him into custody. That seems stupid to me. He was a vicious, ruthless killer of countless people, and should have been taken out with Battle's Dissolvo Ray. Besides the splash panel, you don't even see the Dissolvo. Was it missing in action? At any rate, this is a misstep in storytelling. The Boy Sidekick. By his third appearance, Captain Battle was given the Boy Sidekick. Odd enough, this time around, he was demoted to fifth feature, not counting filler. I hate most of the kids' sidekicks of the Golden Age because they feel forced and didn't add anything. When Robin debuted as Batman's sidekick, it was a huge, huge hit, and everybody wanted to copy that. I'll admit, Robin was cool, and he worked for Batman. A lot of superheroes, though, don't need them. Samson was a lot better without Little David. S.H.I.E.L.D. was a lot better without Dusty. I feel the same way about Hale Battle. He's kind of eh. Hale doesn't ruin the comics, but he didn't help them either. Plus, when they debuted him, they totally decided to ignore Captain Battle's assistant, Jane Lorraine, until issue number 14. In Silver Streak Comics number 12, Captain Battle is hard at work on a cure for the Deglows so they can be turned back into humans. This was cool, and I'm glad the writer decided to work that in. He had a captive Deglow in his mansion for experimentation, and fortunately, the cure worked. The Birdman was turned back into a Chinese major named Ling Fu, who was supremely thankful to Captain Battle. Ling Fu goes with Captain Battle back to Black Dragon's fortress. The Chinese major sprays the Deglows with the De-Witcher gun, turning them all back into human. When the tides have turned, Black Dragon escapes. After that, Captain Battle discovers that one of the Birdmen turned back into a little boy named Nathan Hale. He has no previous memories besides his name, and Captain Battle immediately names him Hale Battle, vowing to take him wherever he goes. That's dumb. Hale is just a little kid. Captain Battle does some dangerous stuff. He doesn't take Jane Lorraine with him everywhere, and she's a grown-up woman. In the same story, right after Black Dragon's defeat, Captain Battle's Luciflyer malfunctions, and the two land somewhere in Tibet. After a fight where Hale, for some reason, is able to beat up full-grown men, he is kidnapped by evil priests who take him as a sacrifice to the false god Moko. The story ends on a cliffhanger, with the captain having to rescue his young protege. The writing slipped in this one. Captain Battle was still a cool feature, just not as cool as it was in the first two stories. Silver Streak Comics number 13. By his second appearance, Hale Battle was already shown on the front cover, alongside his mentor in a matching costume. First of all, Captain Battle himself was pushed hard on the public. I really think they needed to give him more time to become a natural success. Hale Battle was forced on readers even harder. Him being shown on the cover, in a costume, actually gives away one of the surprises in the story. On the inside front cover, Hale is shown in an advertisement for the Captain Battle Boys Brigade. It's kind of funny when you think about it. Hale says, "I was the first member to join." Well, the club had already been around for 2 months, since issue number 11. He didn't show up until number 12. If he was indeed the first member, then it was a poorly performing fan club. Once again the first feature, Captain Battle quickly rescues Hale. Moko and his followers were pretty lame and easy to beat. Then Hale mentions how he wishes he had a Luciflyer like the captain. "Oh, by the way, there's a spare right here," Captain says, giving Hale one of his very own. Okay now, in the last story, the captain had to fix his Luciflyer. If he had a spare, couldn't he have just worn that one until he could repair the other at another time? And how would he have carried the spare? And why didn't he give it to Hale in the first place? Jack Binder and Carl Forms were still in charge of the feature, but it seems to have gotten away from them. What I really don't like is that there is once again no mention of Jane Lorraine in this story. It wasn't right to just replace her so casually like that with a boy sidekick. The action of this story, though, was pretty cool. Captain and Hale come across a Nazi sub in China and quickly take them out, but the sub gets away. Hale saves a beautiful blonde white girl from a burning house and ruins his clothes. The girl, in return, quickly makes him a uniform like Captain Battle's. Okay, I'm just full of questions. Where did she get the material, and just how fast could she sew? They were at the house of a kindly Chinese neighbor. He just happened to have a sewing machine. Captain Battle worries about the sub having a head start. Buddy, by the time it took to get that costume made, they would have been back in Germany. For all her efforts, the girl isn't even given a name. Her father, however, is Dr. Good, a scientist kidnapped by the Nazis for his wound healing formula. Both costumed, Captain Battle and Hale go after the U-boat and quickly defeat the Nazis. The commander, thinking he's captured Captain Battle, uses the dissolvo gun on one of his underlings. We actually see it turn the guy to slop, and it's gross. The element of horrific shock wins out, and the Star-Spangled Duo seals the deal. This is the last time we see the dissolvo gun. Captain Battle doesn't even have a holster for it on his hip after this. I would guess that some people wrote in and complained. Then it was just quietly abandoned. That sucks, because the dissolvo gun was cool, but it was pretty gruesome. Once again, the story ends on a cliffhanger when Hale goes back to the now sinking Nazi sub to retrieve a souvenir. This becomes a quirk of Hale's, to collect grim artifacts from their adventures. Right after the last panel, there is a small ad for seeing Captain Battle live in person. They actually had someone dress up as the character and go around to different cities across the country. There is a photo of him in New York City, and it says that he had already been in several cities. This had to be pretty exciting for kids. I would have gone to see it. Heck, I'd go to see it now. If anyone has photos of these live appearances or knows anything about the actor who played him, contact me. The Return of Jane Lorraine, and the story that wouldn't die. After 2 issues of not seeing or hearing of Jane Lorraine, you would think she had been entirely dismissed. However, she makes her return in Silver Streak Comics number 14, and, of all things, is introduced to Hale Battle. Also shaking things up is the change of crew. Jack Binder is still here, but Carl Forms is out. Replacing him is Jack's brother, Otto Binder. Otto became quite famous writing for Captain Marvel and the Marvel family characters at Fawcett from 1941 to 53. He also created and wrote for a ton of other characters at different publishers during and after that time. Odd enough, Otto also worked for DC at the time they were suing Fawcett over the Captain Marvel character that he wrote for. Unbeknownst to the readers, the story of this issue became the same basic story for the next many issues, with just small tweaks added here and there. It was truly a story that wouldn't die. The first time was cool, because you really didn't expect it. After that, it was like, what the heck? Hare's Skull is an interesting villain in this issue. A nod of sorts to Captain America's The Red Skull, but not a direct ripoff. He and his Skullmen all look like skeletons in green robes, with single spikes coming from the tops of their skulls, resembling the Kaiser helmets of World War I. We're led to believe, for quite a while into the story, that the Skullmen were supernatural. Captain Battle breaks one of their masks, though, and it's revealed that they're just regular, nasty Nazis. During the middle of this skirmish is when Captain Battle introduces Hale to his new home and to Jane Lorraine. It looks like they're going to be one big happy family. Not for nothing, but the change to Otto Binder as writer was a good one. This is probably the best written story Captain Battle had since his first one back in Silver Streak number 10. There didn't seem to be any obvious mistakes, and I like the fact that Jane was brought back on the scene. Right after the story, is a page for Captain Battle's Boys Brigade, and after that was Captain Battle's puzzle page. Lev Gleason was putting a lot of emphasis on this character. If Silverstreak the superhero was a real person, he would have been real depressed. In his very own series, he got eclipsed by Daredevil in issue number 7, and by number 11, Captain Battle. After number 19, Silverstreak got completely kicked out of his own title. The leading feature, since number 18, was the Saint, famous character of books and movies. Silverstreak was everybody's punk. All Together, or Cape or No Cape. Silverstreak Comics number 15 was another milestone for Captain Battle. It was the first and only time Captain Battle, Hale Battle, and Jane Lorraine all appeared on the cover. The story isn't all that different from the previous issue. Instead of posing as a skeleton man, a Nazi spy called the Mummy Master disguises himself as a mummy and plots to kill dollar-a-year executives of the defense program. His underlings dress like mummies too. I'm surprised they decided to copy the earlier adventure like this. I could forgive it if it was a different creative team, but Jack and Otto Binder were still at the helm, although only Jack's name was signed to this story. I like the fact that Jane is in this story again, and she plays a bigger part than she did the last time. She was becoming more of a mother-type figure to both Captain Battle and Hale, like a sexy Aunt Bee. And if you don't get that reference, then I don't know what to do with you. Besides the fact that Hale and Jane get kidnapped, the Mummy crew is far less competent than the Skullmen. I mean, they really suck as spies. They aren't able to even kill one of their targets, and they're easily defeated. Once again, Hale adds another weird souvenir to his collection. I like the team as a trio, and as much as I don't think Hale Battle was necessary, at least they gave him a quirk and made this feature seem like a family act. Number 15 did something else too. It gave Captain Battle and Hale capes for absolutely no reason. On the cover at least. The comic adventure doesn't have them, but the text story does. By number 16 though, I guess it was just going to be a thing from here on. It really doesn't make sense for them to be wearing capes over jetpacks. Apparently, the publisher wanted our heroes to more closely resemble the more popular cape superheroes of other publishers, but it was entirely unnecessary. All Together continued. The next story, in number 16, was the same thing again. It's believed Otto Binder was still the writer, but Jack's involvement is uncertain. It doesn't look like his art at all. This time, the Nazi saboteurs made themselves look like zombies with their leader, Herr Death, dressed as the Grim Reaper. I don't mind sticking with a formula that works, but the same story? This issue prompted a letter writing campaign where they asked the reader what they would like to see next on Hale's shelf. I wonder if anyone answered, nudie magazines! Wouldn't the story behind that be an interesting one? Number 16 is also the last issue we see any talk of the Captain Battle fan club. Odd enough, our heroes were capeless for this ad. The Boys Brigade burned out real fast. It's clear Captain Battle was losing his momentum, but the Lev Gleason publisher really kept trying with him. The brothers Binder were back for the next issue story. Apparently, this series became a Scooby-Doo prototype with Captain Battle chasing after monsters who turn out to be Nazi spies. This time it was vampire men led by Dr. Dracula, and they stole a weapon that automatically reduced people to skeletons. This is pretty gruesome, and the Nazi vampires killed a lot of people in this story. There are 11 human deaths that we see in this story, plus a whole bunch that we don't, and one mouse. They present this weapon as a new idea, but Captain Battle used to use his Dissolvo ray gun that turned people to slop. We haven't seen the Dissolvo since number 13, and he doesn't have it in this issue. It would have made things a lot easier, and it would have been a justifiable means of death for these villains. The downfall of Captain Battle. Captain Battle started with a lot of promise, but his comic life was pretty short. He was rushed to be a success. The dynamic was changed between Captain Battle and Jane Lorraine when Hale Battle was added to the cast. The writer was too eager to add a boy sidekick into the mix anyway. Not only that, but the stories lacked originality after the Captain's first 4 appearances. Also, I thought the Dissolval Ray was just as important to Captain Battle as his Luciflyer and Curvoscope, yet they completely abandoned it. This was a case where the comics really needed some fresh blood. I am normally not into different people taking over a comic, but this is one where it was pretty necessary. Before Silver Street Comics number 18 even came out, the Captain had a pretty big defeat. He had his own comic book title for just 2 issues before it bombed out and got canceled. To be fair, the first issue was a pretty big departure from what people saw of Captain Battle in Silver Street Comics. The art and writing was different, and not very good. I don't think the creative team here paid any attention to Captain Battle's earlier appearances. The short-lived Captain Battle series. In Captain Battle Comics number 1, there is no Hale Battle or Jane Lorraine anywhere in the issue. This comic was cover dated July 1941. The issue of Hale's first appearance was August 1941. The Captain actually shows romantic interest to someone, and it's towards a beautiful French singer. He calls his Luciflyer jetpack Luciflyers, and he doesn't have a dissolvable gun, which he was still using for a while in Silver Street Comics. None of this rings true. I will grant that he had some different enemies here, but his Silver Streak adventures wouldn't start repeating themselves for another 3 months, so it wasn't a real advantage over the other series. The third Captain Battle story in number 1 wasn't even meant to be a Captain Battle story. His identity is public. Always was. But in this story, he has a secret identity. In other words, this comic was made for a different character and changed a bit so they could rush this book out in the market. Pretty sleazy. There were a few other features here, one of which was pretty cool, but if I was a Captain Battle fan before this, I would have been pretty disappointed in this comic. Captain Battle Comics number 2 was an improvement for sure. And our heroes had the capes by this time. Cover dated October 1941, the same time that Silver Street Comics number 15 was out, the whole gang was here. Hale and Jane are here. The brothers Binder are back for the entire 5-part comic adventure, and it was an awesome original story. No Scooby-Doo type villains here. A villain named Ali Hassan, known as the Modern Thief of Baghdad, will stop at nothing to acquire a valuable diamond. In thwarting this bandit, Captain Battle must travel all over the world fighting enemy after enemy. He takes on all kinds of Arabs, a giant sea serpent, cannibals, jungle beasts, an underworld of prehistoric monsters, and a shrinking ray. Hale also meets the genie of Aladdin's lamp and gets 3 wishes. Although Jane isn't in the comic that much, they did a neat workaround. Throughout the whole story, a beautiful blonde girl named Olyra is the guardian of the diamond the villain so desperately seeks. She's drawn a lot like Jane, including a red dress, but wears a headband, so it feels like Jane is more included in the adventure than she really is. Seriously, if you're looking to buy only one of the 2 Captain Battle comics, this is the issue to get. The adventure is incredible, but this was the last hurrah for our hero's own series. Why? The first issue was such a dud that I believe it affected the sales of number 2. even though it was a great comic. It's unfortunate, but that's why you don't rush product. The public is smarter than some people think. So what happened after that? Captain Battle Comics became Boy Comics with issue number 3. Amazingly, it ran through issue number 119 by this name, ending in 1956, but Captain Battle was gone from it. A lot of other great characters appeared in the title, and it took off. The Mighty Captain was stuck at Silver Street Comics, but not for that much longer. Odd enough, there was a Captain Battle Comics number 3, but it didn't come from Lev Gleason. Instead, it was a reprint comic from the Chesler publisher. It reprinted the Captain's stories from Silver Street Comics number 20 and 21, along with some other reprinted material from that series. It's cover dated December 1942, and it's a poor quality reprint. There was no Captain Battle Comics number 4, but there was a number 5 reprint comic, and it did come from Lev Gleason, cover dated July 1943. It is an entire reprint of Captain Battle Comics number 1 from 1941, right down to the ads. The only thing different is the cover by Al Gabriel. It's very odd that they did this. More peculiar is the fact that they dropped the comics part of the name from this title, so it's just called Captain Battle. After this, there was no continuation of this series, but it was really only the first 2 issues anyway. He wasn't a saint. Silver Street Comics number 18 changed things up quite a bit. The title character had lost his luster for a long time. I'm surprised they didn't rename it to something else. Daredevil broke out as a major star, but after number 17, he was gone from the series entirely. Daredevil already had his own title on the market, and it was doing fantastic. Captain Battle wasn't deemed popular enough to be the new leading feature of the series, so another character was chosen, the Saint. The Saint had long been a popular character of books and movies. He was now being given the comic book treatment, and the stories were written by none other than Leslie Charteris, the creator of the Saint. Good or not, the marketing of this was going to easily outsell Captain Battle. No doubt about it. The Saint wasn't a superhero. He was a modern-day, Robin Hood-style thief who fought a lot of villains along the way. He is often perceived as a detective character among the ranks of Bulldog Drummond, Sherlock Holmes, the Falcon, Charlie Chan, and others. This was the Saint's comic debut. His popular comic strip would not start until 1948, so this was pretty exciting for fans of the character. Captain Battle took a back seat to the Saint, for sure. He wasn't even mentioned on the cover. The Binder brothers were back, and so was the Captain, Hale, and Jane, as well as the same old story. This time, a Nazi spy leader posed as Satan and caused mayhem. Wow, did Captain Battle burn out fast. I wonder why the Binders did this. Both of them were so talented. It's as if they quickly grew tired of the character. They were obviously phoning it in. Even the art is not Jack's best work. Oh, when the Saint came marching in. The Saint was the title's lead feature from issue number 18 to issue number 21. I think the Saint was initially very popular for Silver Street Comics. People liked the character in the first place, and they were supposed to be original stories written by the creator himself. Ultimately, it didn't save the series. Silver Street Comics just shifted gears too often. People like some kind of consistency, and this series didn't have it. Jane Lorraine was dropped from the Captain Battle comics once again. The Binder brothers did, however, give us an original story in the form of a continuing saga that was never finished. There was no make-believe monster here, just a master spy from Germany called Baron Doom who wears a funky costume. The search is on for Captain Kidd's long-lost treasure, and the Nazi wants its vast wealth. The battling duo has to find it first. The story continues in number 20. Although Jane wasn't here, another blonde beauty named Joan was. The last panel ends with a contradictory statement from the captain. He declares to Baron Doom that he doesn't kill his adversaries. Well, that's a load of crap. In the early adventures, he didn't shy away from killing at all. It wouldn't make sense if he did. He was a World War I veteran. The writer was trying to soften up Captain Battle, turning him into a kind of character that he was never meant to be. Number 21 has Baron Doom again, and the heroes are still looking for the treasure. The evil Baron has an associate named Friar Diablo, who was actually a sorcerer who conjures up dinosaurs, living skeletons, and living suits of armor to take out Battle and Hale, but it's all in vain. Diablo dies of his own stupidity, and the story ends with Captain Battle stating, "But now off to Alaska. This race for treasure isn't over yet." For us, however, the race was over. We do see Captain Battle again, in a weird way, but his final, multi-part story was left unfinished. After the Battle. Silver Streak Comics number 21, cover dated May 1942, was the last issue of original material. After that, the series was on a nearly 4-year hiatus. Even at that, when the series picked up with number 22, cover dated February 1946, it was all reprints of earlier Silver Streak comics with some filler thrown in. Number 23 came out with a cover date of November 1946, months after the previous issue, and, once again, it was predominantly Silver Streak stories. After that, the series was done. 4 years was a long time to ask people to wait for another Captain Battle story. Even at that, World War II was over, and since the story was about Baron Doom finding the treasure to fund the Nazis, it was dated. People were really glad the war was over, and a lot of the Yay America propaganda had lost its shine. It wasn't a call to arms anymore. Silver Streak Comics was done in 1946, but the Lev Gleason publisher continued for another 10 years. Although it struggled in its later years, Gleason was a major force throughout most of the Golden Age and in the very early days of the Silver Age. Captain Battle Jr. Gleason carried on the legacy of Captain Battle in a very weird way. Instead of picking up where our hero left off in early 1942, they opted to give him a spin-off character, Captain Battle Jr. The character of Captain Battle Jr. first appeared in issue number 1 of his own title, cover dated October 1943. This was just about a year and a half since we last saw Captain Battle. However, he now had a fully grown adult son who was an aviator in World War II. His name is William Battle Jr., but Captain Battle's name was mentioned early on as Jonathan, so that's a screw-up. Where Captain Battle was a superhero, Captain Battle Jr. was simply a war hero. He had no superpowers, but was an expert pilot and skilled fighter. It's a letdown from his father's comics for sure. His father was written as being a prisoner of the Nazis, and in the first issue, Jr. rescues his father, who is out of costume. There is no mention of what happened to Hale or Jane. We know nothing of who Captain Battle had his son with. Since Captain Battle was only supposed to be very late 30s or early 40s, how can he have a son this old doing such incredible stuff? The first story was written by Lev Gleason himself, with Joe Green, and the art was done by Don Rico. The second and last issue is cover dated January 1944. The same creative team was here, but there is no other notable connection to Captain Battle but the name. Overall, this was a real dumb idea. Captain Battle in years gone by. He remains one of those underappreciated characters of the Golden Age, but in 2013, a live-action movie, unofficial, as the character is in the public domain, was released. Originally called Captain Battle Legacy War, it has gone by other titles like Battle Soldier, Captain USA vs. Nazi Fighters, and Dark Skies. The movie has almost nothing to do with Captain Battle of the comics, other than the name, and this movie was essentially made to be a low-budget answer to the Captain America the First Avenger film. The eye patch isn't even over the correct eye. His name in the film is Sam Battle. Not Jonathan, like it's supposed to be, or William, but Sam. He gets a secret serum, like Captain America, that gives him super strength and agility, but everyone can still beat him up. He doesn't even fly in this movie. This movie is overwhelmingly hated by just about everyone who has seen it. Not to mention the fact that this wasn't even made for kids to watch. Captain Battle deserves a more faithful film. It needs to be him and Jane Lorraine fighting evil. No Hale battle, at least not in the first movie. And a spectacular villain. The movie wouldn't even have to be set during World War II. I think a modern day setting for this incredible hero character would work well. Captain Battle is a great American superhero, and those never get old. As a matter of fact, we need them today more than ever before. I'm proud to add him to my anti-terrorist task force in the
Comic Kingdom.